Hey, and welcome. I am Minessa K, your guide on this journey called Stop Shitting All Over Yourself. This podcast is your reminder that you have got this and you are more than enough just the way that you are. In each episode, I bring conversations with amazing individuals who have walked in your shoes. They've stepped away from what others think they should be and the choices that they're told to make, creating their unique life blueprint. These narratives are sure to motivate you, and their strategies will aid you in laying down the foundations for a life that's not just happier, but is authentically yours. If you're on YouTube, please show some love with a like or a subscribe for more enriching content from Minessa TV. But for now, let's tune in to today's enlightening conversation with Allison Guido, CEO of Mar Building and Remodeling in the South Shore of Massachusetts. Now, I met her at the South Shore Women's Business Network about a year ago, and I marveled at her networking chops. She was strategic, and suddenly she was freaking everywhere. And having taught marketing for so many years, I could see how brilliantly she weaved together trainings and conversations and networking events to generate business and strengthen relationships. Now, the number one question I get asked is, how can I find more clients? How do I grow my business and my reach? And Allison has this down pat. I am so thrilled that she joined us today to share her wisdom and her techniques for marketing. And I want you to keep a special ear out for when she starts to talk about her anxiety and social awkwardness. I would not have expected that from her based off my experience or my outside observations of her. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to dive in and massage out some of the deeper issues that many of us have related to networking groups. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I have a very special local friend with me here today. Allison Guido from Mar Building and Remodeling is here with us. She is a South Shore local. Allison, welcome to the podcast today. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Oh, me too, because, so here's the thing. I didn't prep Allison as to why I wanted her here. I was like, I just have to have you on the podcast. And I kept saying things like, there's a secret reason why I want you to podcast. Now, here's what the reason is.
Okay.
So Allison, you are a member of the South Shore Women's Business Network.
Yep.
And I am also a member. And I had not seen you or heard of you or even know who you were at all up until a certain point. And then I'm going to tell you what happened. You show up at a focus chat, okay? Because you had some stuff going on. You've been doing some stuff for a while. And then you come back and I see you. And I'm like, that person is on the cover of our website, right? So that's the first thing, is that you're on the cover of our website. And I was like, interesting. But what happened from that day onwards, and this is absolutely fascinating, and just joyous to watch, is that you became more and more visible, more and more around, and now I know you like you're a part of my life. I know Allison is just around. Allison is in the South Shore. I know when to connect with you.
I love that.
Become such a larger part of the network, and I cannot help but think that is intentional. That you understand the power of networking. So that's actually what I wanted. That I was so blown away by just how naturally, and it may not be natural, but it feels natural on this side, you seem to take to networking. So I'd love to get. Do you know you're a really good networker, or is that something that you're like, whoa, really?
Yes, both.
Nice, rock on.
So I've been in the network for almost 22 years.
Wow! And congratulations. We need to get you a plaque.
Thank you. I'm probably the longest consecutive person. And so how I got into networking, and the network was when I first graduated from college. I work in a family business, and I was at a meeting with peers in the remodeling industry with my dad. And there was a woman from Pennsylvania who was talking about her women's networking group. And my dad turned to me and was like, you have to find one of those. So I found one. I found the Social Women's Business Network, and I started going to meetings, and they started kind of training me. And I took some of the things that they had trained us in sorority for recruitment and took those things. And I am a natural introvert. I am a spreadsheets, behind the scenes person. So it has taken a lot of practice. And one of the things I learned was that it doesn't do me any good not to put myself out there. When you are in business, no one's going to promote you like you do. And so if I want to make connections and I want to do more and sell more with our business, I have to be the one to put myself out there, because otherwise nobody else is going to come straight to me. And so I kind of have taken that philosophy and with a lot of practice, and honestly, it gets easier the more you go to things because you start to see people, right? And I've got a couple of questions that I could feel like I can ask anybody and they'll talk and think I'm interesting. So that's kind of how I became a good networker, is by practice and kind of putting myself out there. And I don't think I'm a great networker, but I've kind of developed a system that my high C personality fits into so that it works well.
Oh my God. Okay. So dude, you got to know this. I have in my notes, I have in there, I'm actually going to read out. It's not properly written because I was notes myself, but here's what it says. Oh shoot. Where did I write it? It's, that it was it was, you are very thoughtful and methodical. I saw all you need to do is look at your LinkedIn to see how thoughtful and methodical you are. So I'm curious, do you apply that same philosophy to networking, which apparently you do?
Yep.
So let me ask you, you mentioned that you're a natural introvert, which I am as well. So, and I don't know where your introversion goes. So I'll ask, like, I'm not anymore, but when I started out, I was terrified of people. Like I'd walk in and I would need to like breathe in my car before I would go into something. Where are you on the spectrum of like,
Yes, so I play out the scenarios. Like if I know where we're going, okay, where's everybody going to be? Who am I going to talk to? What are the first 3 things I'm going to do? What's my goal? Okay. I look at the list of people who are registered for things and I go, okay, I know most of these people. I want to try and meet 3 new people, get 3 new cards, something like that. I kind of think about, okay, what have I done recently that's interesting that I can talk about if somebody asks me a question? So yeah, I definitely like pull up to the place and take a beat and like look around like, okay, I can do this. Who's there? But again, if we don't put ourselves out there and we don't try, it's not high school. Like we're all coming to these things for the same reason, right?
Yeah.
We're all looking for something. We all got out of bed and decided we were going to network today or, do a one-on-one because we want to engage with people. And so nobody is in this room looking for me to fail or be awkward.
That's a really good point. I think that, for so many of us, we're used to being, I don't know that people expect us like that, but we think people expect us to fail, right? Like, I think there's that, right? And I saw a meme the other day that said something like, no one is thinking about you because they're just thinking about themselves and worrying about what other people are thinking about them. And like, that really resonated with me very heavily. And I have to admit, I struggled with it because I don't remember that at like the key moments, like when I go into a networking and I don't need that kind of tool as much anymore. But when I do, and I'm in the moment, I typically don't tend to think about the fact that, that person's probably just more worried about what I think about them, or do I have spinach in my teeth or something like that. Yeah. And like, you mentioned something about what are the 3 questions. So I'm actually curious because I do that as well. I try to, depending on the time of the year, where we're at, whatever, I try to have a few go-to questions. Like being in Massachusetts, the Patriots are always a good go-to at any given time of the year. So you can always, especially right now where Belichick has got his seat, I can just start the conversation. I don't even watch football right now, right? But you can just, that's a good one that you can sort of start something. But then there are things about like, what do you like to do? Tell me more about your business. Things where you're expressing interest in someone else. Right. To where because like people want to belong and they want to feel like they are belonging. So I'm curious. All right, so now you joined the group. By the way, here's what I'm curious about. So this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The internet is now, like, what are we at? 2023. So that's 2000. So the internet's like pretty happening at this point, but it's not like it is now. So people were not growing that way. You didn't have that crutch that like people tend to fall on right now, which is the internet. I'm so curious to hear from you as terms of like you've seen both where you were running a business before and after. How has the social media landscape, in your opinion, changed how people network, how you feel like maybe people are succeeding less, or like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because you really crossed that bridge. Like you were there.
What I think is interesting is I actually legit think I found the network in the newspaper.
Oh my God, I love it.
I think there was an ad in the local, like, the Ledger or the Hanover Mariner or something like that. And I think there was like this little ad. And I think I did some Googling too, or whatever it was called at the time. It's probably Ask
That's
Jeeves.
right. I think it was like Yahoo or Ask Jeeves back then.
Starting to date myself, aren't I? But yeah, it was definitely a different world. The way we connected outside of a meeting was different because we didn't have, at the time, it was still a MySpace world. It wasn't even a Facebook world. I remember getting on Facebook. I had to have a friend who had a college email address get me an invite.
Oh, yes.
So when you think about in terms of how long we've been networking, it was a different world. But the principles are the same, right? The things that make good networking are the connecting outside of the meeting, sending a handwritten note. But you couldn't promote yourself in the way that people do constantly now with the Facebook messages and posts and free kind of marketing the way that they do it now. It was still it was a different type of thing, but the things that worked well then still work well now. The one-on-ones, the personal connections, making sure that people know, like, and trust you so that when they need you, you're their first go-to person.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that, where it's like this, that these old methods still work. And I think that it's because like they're rooted in like human nature and the things that are important to us. Because so when I taught marketing and coached business, one of the things that I talked about a lot was that you're using social media to mimic the behaviors and relationship building techniques that previously were done in person, like the things that you talk about that work. But I think at some point, like, people have lost touch with that fact that is what the social media aspect is for. It's there to build the relationships and have, like, you and I have one-on-one on a Zoom. That's great. Perfect. Right. That's very different from me sending you a hey girl, hey message asking you to buy something for me or something like that many people use social media for. I'm curious to know because, social media is also very immediate and short term, so I'm going to come up with 50 people and just message them all right now and then message 50 more people tomorrow. It's like a bulk thing.
Yeah.
But I found, in terms of my local networking stuff, that it's less immediate gratification and more like, I've known you now for like a year or two, and someone may need a remodel in like 6 months, and I'll send them to Almar, and you'll get that contract and you'll run with it. But like the true fruit of this work didn't actually come for like 3 years.
Yep.
So I'm interested in your thoughts in terms of on networking as a one-time activity, as opposed to like an ongoing thing that you're really planting seeds that won't grow or sprout for a while.
Yeah, it's definitely, networking is not a silver bullet. It's not a, oh my goodness, leads are down, I'm going to go to 3 networking events this week and then things are going to be fine. Mm-hmm. It's been 20 years and I'm just now sometimes seeing, like, sometimes I go to something and somebody says, oh, great, I need you. But it's definitely a drip method, right? And if you put together a good system for capturing those people, for connecting with those people, for following up long-term and educating them in what you do long-term, that's where the real power of it comes from. We are going to do a bathroom remodel here in the next couple of weeks. And the woman is, she's becoming disabled and she needs somebody to do her bathroom. And so she called us, and then she lives alone. So she called a friend and said, can you meet with me with the contractor? I'm nervous about being there alone. And the friend said, sure. Who's coming? And they said, oh, Almar. And the woman said, I know Allison. I met her at a networking event in 2019. She is fabulous. So, I didn't even remember who this person was, but she came up. I saw her at a networking event shortly thereafter, and she came up and she said, "Thank you so much. It was so great. I knew that because she called you, everything would be fine." And I felt horrible because I didn't remember her, but I did my job I did my job as a networker because it's like 6 years later, and she remembered me. She remembered who I was as a person, and that her friend calling us, she knew her friend would be taken care of and we're going to do it right. Yeah. And she's not going to have a problem. So part of my system is I capture the the names of people and their information. And I have a spreadsheet, and even if I don't see them at a networking event, I'm still drip contacting those people either via email or postcard at intermittent points so that I stay relevant to them and I stay regular to them. So this list goes back 20 years of people who are still getting my contact information, because at some point I'm going to hit them on the right day.
Well, and it's also the thought of like, when I think about, because I only recently began networking sort of like actively. I learned how to, let's see, I'm thinking prior to like 2019, I was zero networking, like zero, because I was so afraid of people. I wouldn't do anything. So this is not that long ago. We're talking 4 years.
Yeah.
And then, let's go a little bit with 2018. And then I joined a networking group. I was living in Franklin, and it was a lovely networking group. But right as we really, like, I was building relationships, it was so fun. And then the pandemic hit, and then I moved to Plymouth. And so when I came here, I was like, okay, my main goal was to get the podcast into the local community, because I my message is important, want to get it out there and so on. And so to do that, spread the word, become popular. How do I do that? Find a networking group. So I looked through a bunch of them. So I joined, the way that I typically do it is I've joined like, I did this in Franklin at work. I joined like 5 or 6, and I'll go, not really join, but like go to their guest thing or like see, and then pick a short list. And then ultimately I'll end up, finding the one. And then it's just a matter of, and the South Shore Women's Business Network, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, because there are networking groups that I've joined in the past and just not done because it's just, I can't even with it. Right. And they're just like, they don't give you what you need, or they're too transactional focused or whatever. Right. But I feel like the SSWBN has cracked some sort of a code. Like they really understand. Like I have never seen something generate so much. Like if you put your event on the SSWBN page, it'll sell out, like guaranteed. And it's like, I feel like there's a reason why you've been in this organization for 20 years. So here's my question for you. Have you been in some organizations where you were like, holy shit, this is bullshit, I am not staying here? And what was that experience like for you? And like, how did that keep you from, because your dad's like, I mean, you were younger when you jumped in, so you'd already had like a little bit of successes, but how did that hold you back when you're like, oh my God, I can't go to that network, I can't have another experience like that or something like that?
Yeah. So I did the same thing. So at one point, any networking event I was invited to, I went to. So I tried a ton, and we were in a bunch of different groups. We hit some of those very transactional ones. We hit some local ones that were trying to mimic the transactional ones that were not through that in industry ones. And I went to all of them. And some of them were just painful to sit through. Some of them were like, you have to bring a lead to 3 leads every time. And it was like, oh my God, I haven't met 3 new people who might like fit with any of these people. And there was a lot of anxiety, because it was like, if you don't pass so many leads, you're getting kicked out. And it was like, but I'm just going to give somebody a name for something else. It just did not fit with my organizational structure in my brain. And what I loved about the way the South Shore Women's Business was set up, and over 20 years, it has run the gamut of organizational systems. Like at one point we had a staff and had an executive director that was paid that ran it. And then we had the method we have now, where it's president and vice president and kind of all volunteer based. So I've kind of seen the gamut of the way it's been run, but at the core, it always goes back to the way the founders wanted it to be: contacts, coaching, collaboration, and community. And so there was always that structure and that educational piece at every meeting, so that if you didn't know somebody, you were automatically going to be able to talk to somebody and share your story and hear their story. That's been across the board at every event. It's not just, let's show up at a bar and walk around, because that gives me so much anxiety. Like,
oh my God, so much.
I'm by myself and I don't know where to go, and you have to drink, and I'm just going to push myself into a group. So that's one of the things that I really liked about it. And it made me feel comfortable, because I could come in, sit at a table. There was a facilitator most of the time whose job it was to make sure that everybody got spoken to or got a chance to talk.
Yeah.
And so that that's part of the reason I think that the system has worked. It's been more a focus on building quality relationships that will eventually pay off, and educating each other to build each other up, as opposed to giving around a bunch of names of people who don't necessarily even are interested in our product.
That's, I think, I love that you brought that up, because I think that like this idea of networking referrals, right? So like the one where you're like, you have to bring a lead, and I've been there, and that's, and I'm like, I didn't meet 3 new people this year,
right?
And also I feel like in some cases it's like I kind of don't want to refer you if you're forcing me to refer you, right? It's like, and I know that sounds petulant, but it's true. So I'm more what's the word? I'm more likely. That's actually kind of why I switched my business model, and I love the assistant again, is because I just like referring people. So that's what I do. Anyone needs something, I'm like, I'll refer you, because I know everyone. And going back to what you were saying about your systems, I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because I think that the challenge that most people have is they don't have a system, right? They don't know how they're going to do it, how they're going to keep in touch. I also have a spreadsheet. I use Airtable, where I put people's names and information, and as we talk, I add like details so that I don't forget.
Yeah.
And then that way somebody's shocked that I know that their dog got sick 6 months ago, and it's like, yeah, dude, I put it in my Airtable. Like, I'm not going to actually remember these things in my brain. So I'm curious for you, what is your general system for, when you go meet, follow up, that kind of thing?
So yeah, I usually go in, and depending on the size of the event, I say, okay, I want to get 3 cards or meet 3 new people. And going back to that digital version versus old school, I was at an event recently, and a bunch of people didn't have cards, like physical cards. They're like, oh, I only have I don't even know what they're called, like
a
virtual cards.
I think it's called like a dot, or like they have a couple of electronic ones where you like tap your phone, or
virtual
whatever.
Cards. And I was like, yeah, no, you also need to have real cards still. Like, you still need to be able to stick your card in for a drawing, or have something that I can write down, because I get 1,000 emails a day, maybe. Like, trying to always connect through my computer isn't the best way. Send me a bill, because otherwise you're not getting paid. Because if it's an email, it's definitely getting lost. I need to be able to touch you. So the same thing, like I want to try and meet 3 new people, get 3 new cards. I jot down the notes on the card. I add it to my spreadsheet. And then I send a handwritten note to the new people that I've met, and say, hey, it was so great to meet you. Send my card again. And then I also go and I look them up on Facebook and LinkedIn, and try and connect with them there, because the doing of the posts is another touch to stay top of mind, but not necessarily to harass people with. So it's kind of like I say with my marketing plan, I still pick a little bit out of every box. And that's how I do it with networking as well. And then a lot of times, if I'm going to a networking meeting and there's somebody that I think is super interesting or seemed a little shy, I'll send them a message and say, hey, I'm going to go to this meeting. If you're interested, you can meet me there, or something like that. So, because people want to be invited too, right? They don't, when I'm at a networking event, I usually try and find the person who's standing by themselves or looking at their phone, because they desperately want somebody to come up and talk to them, for the most part. I mean, every now and then people are really checking messages, but a lot of times it's that they're afraid and they don't know how to start the conversation.
I did that. So when I was practicing, practicing my networking, I remember I went in and I thought to myself, people are always surprised, one, that I'm introverted and terrified of people, because I seem so outgoing, and it's like there's
Me too.
Therapy. I use a lot of therapy. Like it's really a lot of it. But because I look bold, I then I was like, you know what, there's people here who feel worse than me. So I want to, like, as long as I'm looking towards who can I help, I think less about myself, and I think less about my own anxieties and less about my own challenges. So I think I like that idea a lot, where it's like, look for someone who is alone, because then you become the care, almost like you are giving care rather than sitting here feeling anxious. One of the things that I do, so here's my system in terms of not meeting people. This is a system about not to meet people. So if I go to an event and I'm feeling overwhelmed, because that does happen. I'm autistic. I sometimes will get overwhelmed, and I'm like, I cannot function in this moment. I'll go hide in the bathroom, and I'll hide in the bathroom for like 5 minutes. And what's funny is that I didn't, until I realized that nobody is actually checking my bathroom visits, right? I can go to the bathroom like 4 times and sit and just like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm so weird. Because nobody's watching me leave and come to the bathroom. And if they are, who cares, right? So I will go to the bathroom and just sit there, breathe in, do some meditation. And honestly, like that actually a lot of times will help to reset me, and I'll just go
Yeah.
back out and then be good for another 15, 20 minutes. Doesn't always happen, but like I feel like if you need a rescue, it's good to know like what your rescue is. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you ever have like, what is your go-to if you're like, okay, I've been here for a bit and like you suddenly start to feel overwhelmed or sick or tired or just like, I feel bleh. What do you do?
I go and I check in with the people at the check-in desk.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's a lull there and I'll be like, how's things going? Everything okay? Do you guys need anything? I'm a big one that for years I had the feeling that I didn't matter unless I was helping somebody. Like
Me too.
my purpose, and people liked me because I was doing things for them. So I still kind of revert back to that. I'll take a break. I'll walk up, especially if there's nobody at the table, and then just see like, how are things going? Are we busy tonight? Anything going on? So like a lot of times that's what I'll do is I'll mosey over to where there aren't a lot of people. So if there's nobody, I mean, if there's a lot of people checking in, I clearly don't do
you're not
that.
Going to go and start a conversation.
Right. And usually I know that person too. So it's like, it's easy. Like I break of a conversation.
Dude, I want to come back to what you said because this is a philosophy I embodied for many years and I believed it. Service is the price I pay for the space I occupy. And I did not believe that I deserved to live on this earth or be on this earth or breathe the air that anybody else breathed unless I was doing something for someone else, because otherwise why even exist? This is a terribly unhealthy way of thinking of things. And so for many years I did exactly that, but you're absolutely right that when I find myself in like a moment where I'm like have a autistic meltdown or whatever, the first thing I'll do is go see how can I serve someone. Even I just said the first thing I do when I go into this is who can I serve. And I think this is me therapizing myself on my podcast, is that I'm thinking to myself that there's a difference between doing the service so that you can justify your existence on this planet and doing the service to build relationships, make friends, right, make somebody feel better, that kind of thing. So I think that like that's the thing I had to work through in therapy, was like I could still do the same activities, but I'm not doing it to justify the fact that I'm even at this event, right? Like, right, oh, I'm at this event, so I'll help you. Let me clean, let me dust, let me, do something.
Right. Like, so it was a lot of people wouldn't invite me out or talk to me if I wasn't doing something for them. So if I joined a board, it was like, I have to have a role in the board or nobody's going to talk to me. Mm-hmm. There's no need for me. And then I think I was like almost 40 before I felt like I have friends who like me for me and not for what I will do for them. So
I was also in my 40s. So I feel like something happens when I'm 47 now. If you feel free sharing your age, you're more than welcome. If not, I'll edit this out.
I'm 43. So
you're 43. Okay.
Yeah.
So dude, 40s are good times, right? 40s are like, I think when I was also able to now, and even now I'm still, sometimes I'll look at people and I'll be like, oh my God, you really, and I have to think about that. Like, so as I've been recovering from surgery, I haven't been able to go to as many events, and I keep thinking, my God, they're going to kick me out. I'm like, no one's gonna freaking kick you out. Like, everybody just cares about you, and I think networking groups really help to deprogram that, because you really start to build relationships with people who are invested in you as well.
Right.
And there's something very meaningful when you're surrounded by people who are invested in you for no other reason than you are you. Like, you're right, not doing anything for them. You're not. I love that so much.
And there's a wide range of experiences in networking groups, right? So when I'm with my mom friends, our experiences are very similar, but we're all in the similar age. So we haven't had different life experiences as vastly as at a networking event. When I came in my 20s, there were women in their 60s. Now I'm in the middle of the group, right? There's younger women coming in and older women. So having those conversations are different than when you're surrounded by people in your peer age group.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, and I think that like, there's also that element of, as you said, like when you're in your peer age group, there's almost like a comfort that's there. Whereas when you're surrounded by people who are older than you, you almost feel like, especially as socialized women, shut up and listen to the elders, people who know what they're doing, and let them talk. Or like, do you really know enough to be saying something? Like there's a whole lot of stuff. I don't know if you brought that with you, but I definitely brought that with me in my first few networking meetings.
Yeah. And we had the 30th anniversary for the gala recently for the Social Women's Business Network. And it was funny because there was this whole table of women who were in their 40s ish when I came in my 20s, and I was like, oh, those people, they know everything. And then like, they didn't, and they still don't. But it definitely was that like, oh, Allison's the baby, and they're the wise old people. And you start to realize that they don't know any more than you do once you start to talk to them.
Okay, so we're so all over the place now. I don't even care anymore because this is just so fun. So I'm curious, right? Do you think that because when we were younger, because you and I are basically the same, in fact, you're the same age as my wife. So there was an element of the elders know everything, and the younger you are, you don't know anything. And I just don't feel like that exists now. So it's so funny that I feel like that the 30th anniversary event we had we had people of all ages, but I feel like it was age less in the socialization. Like everybody was socializing with everyone else.
Yeah.
Whereas because I feel like something has happened, maybe it's the internet, maybe it's pandemic, I don't know, but something has happened to where I don't feel like the age difference matters as much. And I think when we meet and we talk, we're all really just looking to see like, oh my God, I'm excited to get to know you. What can we learn from each other? Like, do you feel like that difference has happened over the last 20 years or so?
I think that in certain areas it has. I think that in the women's networking group, it has, because I think that the way we have built the culture we have built in some of these groups speaks to that. I think that there are some groups that don't.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
I think it's a cultural difference. I think that depending on who you're with and where you're with and the type of person and the type of people who are facilitating, that's definitely true, that there's something to be learned by everybody. But I think that in other groups and other organizations that it's definitely a do as you're told, not as you know what I mean, kind of situation.
Diplomatic. Very diplomatically put, Allison. Impressively.
I'm getting better in my old age.
And you're absolutely right though. Like when you said that, I was like, no, there's still that. I think that like I enjoy being in the spaces where, I think it was a lot of humility for me to like pick that up. Like as in I didn't have that humility and I had to learn it. Where I was growing into the aged area where I am the elder, right? I'm 47 now. And then I realized, shit, I knew nothing. And I was like, wow, okay, this is okay. And what's interesting is in the last year or so, my biggest teachers have actually been millennials and Gen Z. And I'm just like blown away by how brilliant they are. But yeah, there's definitely people who are still like, listen, shut up and do what I tell you. And you're like, but it's wrong. And this is a dumb way of doing it. And they're like, well, too bad.
Well, and I always try to tell my team, my ego is not so big to think that we're doing everything right, or that the way that I've set it up is the way that it should be. Like, I'm making it up as I go along too. So if you guys have a better suggestion, let me know. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to go with it, but don't feel like my ego is so big that I can't hear another idea or be taught a new way to do something.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that also came with age. Were you always like that, or did that did you grow into that?
I think I've been like it for a long time but I think I was lucky enough to come into peer networking groups in my 20s with, I joined, my father was already in a peer networking group with similar remodelers from around the country who didn't compete with each other. And I was 20 and they were 40, 50, 60. And I think I was lucky enough to learn things from them at an age where most 20-year-olds wouldn't have, and they kept saying, if I had this opportunity in my 20s, where would I be in my 40s and 60s, And so I kept trying to be very open to that, to continue to learn and grow so that I could be in a better place when I got to be their age.
All right, I have two questions for you. The first question is this. You were talking earlier about how there's like baby Allison and like you were young, and you brought this up a couple times. And I've also always been in the places I've worked, I've always been like young, but overachiever and high and wow. So I'm curious because we both went through this moment where you stop being the young prodigy and you start being like, now you're just normal.
Oh no. I'm not the young prodigy anymore.
I know, right? So I'm curious. Oh my God. I was going to say, how did you feel when you realized that? But maybe I wasn't just really made you realize that. You're having this whole moment on camera. No, but I'm actually curious. Like, because I remember when I realized, damn, I'm really good at what I do, which is great. And that's awesome. But I'm not the young prodigy anymore, right? So it's like, I can still be great at what I do, but now I'm 47. I figure like you would expect me to be good at what I do at this point. Right. Practice that. So I'm curious, did I just reveal that to you?
No, but what is interesting is that the remodeling industry is an aging industry. And very often when I am in things for my industry, I am still one of the youngest people there. I just took a class for my, to renew my license, my construction supervisor's license. And I was absolutely the youngest person in the room, which was very upsetting to me. One, because I've been doing this way too long to be the youngest person in the room. And two, what is going to happen to my industry if I'm the youngest person in the room? Like, that there's no other 20 or 30-year-olds getting their license, renewing their license.
That is a really, really good point. My industry is actually struggling with the exact same thing, where it's giant. We have a huge group of people who are retiring out, and and there's not a lot of new people coming in, or the new people who come in burn out and leave within 2 years. So this is something my sister and I talk about a lot as well, is how do you create enthusiasm for an industry, because a lot of it's enthusiasm, it's marketing, there's just so many things involved with it in order to but yeah, I definitely get that. So there is, like you said, not being the young ingenue is great, because that ensures the longevity of your industry. That's a really important question. Now you've got me thinking about something else, because now I'm like, oh yeah, me too.
Right. Well, and what can I do to support people come into our industry? That's also the hard thing, if you, for what I do, if you look at the VOTEC programs, a lot of times they're trying to direct people towards the union, and South Shore VOTEC has a waiting list. And even though there are kids who want to get into these programs, they can't get into these programs.
Really?
So what do we do now that there's a slight shift back away from, you got to go to college to be successful? How do we help create this? And we live in a video game generation where kids aren't being taught how to do manual things and work with their hands. And why are things so expensive? Because I can't get anybody to do the work. And if they do, and if I can, who's any good, first of all, I'm not going to send somebody who's not good to your house either. They want to be compensated for their experience.
You are so right. I think that's really, and I think this is a really good example, by the way, of networking happening, right? Because we're talking, and I feel like I want to connect with you about this, because we have a similar challenge, similar problem, that you never really know how these things are gonna grow out there.
Right.
So I'm actually curious, because a lot of, one of the things that I'm doing is trying to build interest in research administration and so on. And my sister and I are building our thing on that side, a whole separate thing on that. So I am curious. So if there are people who are listening who are either have children or people in their family who this is something that they'd like to explore, because they're like, because there's always people who are looking for their next thing, right? What can I do next? Research administration might be it. Call me. Construction and getting certified may be it, and they can reach out to you. But I think that, so I'd love to hear a little bit about tell what kind of person would thrive in a space like this.
I think people, for what I do, is people who like to be outdoors, which is kind of crazy, but somebody who likes to problem solve and do math and use their brain. A lot of times we get a bum rap in the construction industry that carpenters are dummies. You have to be really intelligent and inquisitive to do this kind of stuff and figure out how to problem solve. We live in the Boston area. These houses are old, and they were built with not to the current codes. So coming up with creative ideas and being able to want to step back at the end of the day and say, I've done that, is huge. Our bodies aren't built to work in cubicles, right? We're not built to sit in front of computers all day. And so the team that we have, men and women who work with us, who are most successful, are those people who like to do something different every day, who like to use their hands, who like to problem solve and build relationships, because we are constantly building relationships with people too, whether it's our homeowners or our office team or our trade partners. So there's people who like to do lots of different things. Sometimes ADD people are great for this role because you're constantly doing something different.
I have ADHD. It's like, damn, yeah, it's nice when you're doing something different all the time, for sure.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, and as we slowly start to wrap up, so there's a couple things I want to share with the listeners as we start to wrap up. First is that if you, I know you love Allison because she's amazing. reach out to her, right? If you're local in the South Shore, she's one of our South Shore special features. But the one thing that I want to make sure everyone knows is because you do remodeling, can you tell my listeners and my friends kind of what it is that you do? I should have probably started with this, but you know me, I'm all over the place. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you help people.
Sure. So my company is Mar Building Remodeling. We're out of Hanover, and we're a third generation company. 2024 is going to be our 65th year in business.
Nice.
And my goal is to break contractor stereotypes through our core values of, communication, education, quality, and integrity. And we do everything from window and door replacements right through kitchens, bathrooms, additions, basements, and new homes. So we service people by, honestly, if it's anything to do with your house, trying to give you a well thought out solution at a reasonable price to make it the home of your dreams where you can live your best life.
Love it so much. This is fabulous. Thank you so much for, honestly, everything. Like, I have a whole long list of things I need to thank you. First, being on the podcast, being on the board, being just being such a great networker and friend. And I'm so glad you were able to make it today. Is there any last message that you'd like to share with my listeners?
Oh, you know what? I wanted to tell you this. I love the title of the podcast, Stop Shitting on Yourself, because honestly, before we met, that in one of my advisory groups, that was an exercise I had to do because I'm very I have to be doing something. I have to be serving people. And so I was challenged with the exercise of every time I thought I had to sit down for 10 minutes and not do something. And so if you're that type of person, it's a very hard habit to break. Oh, I should go put the laundry in. I should go do this. Oh, I should help so-and-so. I had to every time the word should popped into my head that I should be doing something and I was shitting all over myself. I had to sit down for 10 minutes and reset.
Wow. And now I'm curious, how did that help you?
Oh my God. It took a long time to break that habit, but I definitely don't should as much as I used to. I mean, I'll add stuff to a list, but it definitely has calmed that almost ADHD thinking in my head, oh, this popped in my head. I should do this. Oh, I should do this. I should do that.
Yeah.
It really definitely helped. So, if you're a should'er, it's a great exercise to try.
I cannot even tell you how grateful I am that you shared that story, because I'll tell you, so when I was at rock bottom and coming out, April 2018, one of the first challenges I was given by my therapist was challenge to stop saying what if. So I was what ifing everywhere. What if, and I said, listen, I am trying to make sure that I'm protected. Like, now I know what could happen. I've solved the problem. And my therapist said, that's great. That's a good story. Let's try not to do that. So for 1 week, she said, let's see what your life is like if you don't do that. And I honestly don't do it at all anymore. It's been 5-6 years now. And because I was so happy, it takes such a weight, the guilt, the pressure. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's now going to be a snippet in and of itself. It's just going to be like, hey guys, do this. Because if you challenge yourself for a week and a half or two to do it, eventually you'll just stop, because you realize, one, how often you're doing it, but two, how useless. Like, we almost feel like we need to say I should, but we really don't. And I have to say, I got to tell you this. I wish I could take credit for the name. The name that I had for this podcast was actually shit. I had a community at the time. I was running a group coaching community, and my community was like, yeah, no, that's not happening. And then they said, just wait. And then Jessica Hopkins, she was the one who named the podcast. She said, you need to change your podcast. This is the name. And I said, yep, you're right. This is the name. So I always message her when someone says they like the name, to be like, hey, someone said they like the name today. So she gets a lot of those. So I'll message her today to tell her. So thank you so much.
Good job. And people like to get good feedback. So
I know, right? Exactly. Thank you so much. You are the best.
Thank you for having me.
Links to all of your social and Almar Remodeling will all be in the show notes.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time talking to you, and I will talk to you again soon.